Welcome to today's meeting of the Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, the meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Before we begin, can I please remind everyone to turn on their microphones when they wish or are invited to speak. I have received apologies from Mr. Crook, who is attending other council business. I've also received apologies from Mrs. Broadley. I would also like to welcome Fiona Barber from Health Watch. Okay, so we move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of January 2026. I move that these are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Item 2, the next on agenda, question time. I can confirm that I have received no questions. And agenda item 3 is questions asked by members under Standing Order 32.1. I can confirm that I have received no questions. Agenda item 4, I have no urgent items. And agenda 5 is declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members wish to declare any interest? Item 6 is declarations of the party whip in accordance with Overview and Scrutiny Procedure Rule 16. Do any members wish to declare the party whip? Nobody. Item 7, presentation of petitions under Standing Order 33. I have not received any petitions. And moving on to item 8, the draft Leicestershire Carers Strategy 2026 to 2030. The report is on pages 13 to 42 of the agenda pack. I would like to welcome the chairman, Mr. Mark Bulls, and spokesperson, Mrs. Taylor and Mrs. Danks of the Children and Families Overview Scrutiny Committee to the meeting to hear the presentation of this report on the draft Leicestershire Carers Strategy 2026-2030. The report will also explain the development of the strategy and the priorities for delivery. Mr. Bulls is present online. I would also like to welcome Sharon Cook, Director of Children and Families Services, and Hayley Binley, Head of Services, to the meeting. We haven't got Mr. Abbott with us, have we?
Mr. Binley, Miss Binley's not online.
No, it's not. Inderjet Lehal, Assistant Director, will introduce this item. Indy, can you please go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll give a short summary of the report and welcome any questions or comments from Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So the report seeks feedback from the committee on the draft carer strategy for 2026 to 2030. In particular, the key priorities and the consultation that we're looking to undertake post-Cabinet. I'll go through some of the key points in the report and then absolutely open up. So in terms of policy context, paragraphs 2 onwards highlights some of the key policy areas and background and statutory duties of the council, most notably the current carer strategy, which is an LLR strategy, our Care Act duties, and also the most recent council decision to recognise carers as a key group to engage with moving forward. In terms of some of the local needs and evidence, so the report details some key statistics. So you'll see that there's just over 60,000 unpaid carers in Leicestershire. We undertake about 1,400 assessments annually, and just over 2,300 people receive council supported services. For young carers, there are 116 referrals and 69 assessments, so we undertook that in 2025, and 341 young carers passports issued since 2022. The report details our engagement we've undertaken, and we undertook that between October and December 2025 We engaged with carers groups, community groups, and we did quite a big event on Carers Rights Day. We've had online Teams discussions and had surveys and one-to-one discussions as well. As part of that engagement, we engaged just over 300 adult carers, 19 young carers, and 20 professionals, contributed to that engagement activity across both the council, health, and other partners. Just some of the key themes that came from carers on the day, or throughout the engagement. I was touching a few, so something around recognition, people need to take a break and have respite, people feeling isolated, a key one around information, both overload of information and actually accuracy of what's out there and what people need to know. Access to services, peer support, costs as well wasn't always clear to people, access to health services, and something specific around young carers where there were key areas around breaks, mental health support, and balanced education and caring. One of the comments I think from our scrutiny on the dementia strategy, which this links in quite well with around carers and people caring for people with dementia. I think one of the comments was around finances, and people need to understand what they're entitled to, how it all works in the system. I think there's a bit of confusion around that. So that's one of the key things that also came out of the engagement. In terms of the priority areas that we have developed as part of the draft strategy, there are 3 areas that we've pulled together. The first one is around recognition, people, carers being recognised for what they do, valued, listened to, and supported to continue to care. Second was around information, so having that accurate, timely, and relevant information and advice. And the third being carers are supported with their wellbeing and access to services when needed. As part of the consultation plans, excuse me, sorry. As part of the consultation plans, so subject to Cabinet approval on the 24th of March, we'll be asking carers and stakeholders specifically around their views on the accuracy of the strategy, the importance of the proposed priorities, and what would make the most difference to carers. We're planning to do that through online surveys, online meetings, face-to-face sessions as well. And specifically, we're going to be doing additional engagement with parent carers and our health partners. One of the key pieces of work that's underway with health colleagues is regarding specific inclusions in the strategy on actions that are health or joint with the council to ensure that the system, the wider system, is supporting carers. And whilst the current draft strategy has specific areas relating to young carers, we're keen to ensure the strategy provides support for all carers across the county, including parent carers of children with a disability. So we're going to use this consultation period to engage parents and carers as part of this process. And we need to just ensure as part of that the carer strategy aligns with the SEND strategy for the county as well, to avoid duplication of approach and actions, but to make sure we're consistent across what we're actually supporting people with. The report goes on to detail just some of the key resources that we spend across the council for carers. So it's about 3.5 million in 24-25. We have a service that we commission with Voluntary Action South Leicestershire, which is a carer support service that offers information, advice, support and guidance to people. That's circa £180,000 per year. We have a support at home pilot, which part of that supports carers to continue to care through the provision of a kind of sitting service for people. And we do have a dedicated carers team in the customer service centre who undertake reviews, assessments on behalf of the council or for the council. So in terms of next steps, as outlined earlier, so the Cabinet decision to go out to consult, we're asking Cabinet to approve that on the 24th of March. We'll then undertake a period of consultation, and we'll have those consultation results and final strategy presented back to Cabinet in September. And following approval, we'll publish our final strategy following that process. There will be parts that we'll need to take to our respective teams and our health colleagues as well as part of their governance as well. So happy to either take questions or comments, or if anyone else wants to comment on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to offer that the work across the two departments is taking place and is critical for this strategy to ensure it's inclusive of all carers, including parent carers and our young carers. So support everything that's been outlined.
Thank you for a comprehensive overview. Mr. Abbott is absent, so he will not want wishing to add anything to his item. So I'll open the floor. Questions or comments from members? Go with Mr. Innes then.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to endorse the 3 priorities that you've put together because as a carer myself, or a past carer as well, information flow is key to everything. It's always very difficult to find out what you're entitled to, what you're not entitled to, what support there is, what support there isn't, etc., etc. And I just like to endorse the 3 priorities there that they will certainly focus on what carers need. I like also the fact that the pre-consultation, I think with the 300, talked about voices not heard. That's key as well, because I think there's a lot of experience out in the community about how things could be improved. And I'm really glad that the consultation going forward will be focused on carers, professionals, etc. And I think that's important. Funding is always a critical aspect of this, and clearer information, perhaps in the strategy of looking at how carers can apply for funding and get funding. I think that's another critical area as well for supporting the carers. I've got to say as well, if it wasn't for these carers, what would we do? They're doing a lot of work, voluntary work. Of course, it's families. Of course, families will look after families. But I'd like to also just put on record that I recognise the work, the voluntary work that goes on in our county as well. So thanks for pulling the report together, and I endorse what you've put together. Thank you.
Mrs. Page.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Ditto to all of that. But for me, I'd like to kind of understand, while pages 16, 17, they set out all of the barriers, then we have the priorities in words. And then if we're going down page 30 and 35, we're talking about support at home and the amount of money that is spent on support, which, you know, I've read with interest. However, what I can't get, I've never cared. So, well, I have cared, but, you know, for do you know what I mean? You know, for my father-in-law and things, but not in a way that it was whereas I needed to actually access support services and things. So what I'm trying to get my head around here, it is how does it actually look like in actions and reality? So if I'm a carer, so it says, you know, support at home and there's digital preference and whatever, but how, if I don't know, how do I get access? How do I know? Is there a register? Is there a register for young people? Because if you are, say, in your 40s, so you're quite forward, you pick the phone up and you say, you know, help me. But how about a young carer or whatever? So just talk me around what there is available. How, if I'm a new carer caring for my mother or my husband, how do I get approached? How do I know that all of this is accessible? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Page. So there's different ways to access support and services. A lot of carers are identified through their GP. That's one kind of route that people identified. But then it's kind of the flip from that. So where does the GP then go to refer people, or what's the kind of support from there? One of the key things that has come out from the engagement, and probably, you know, in essence, part of our CQC plan as well, was around access to information, advice, support. When can people access services? What's the right time, and where are those access points? I would say that today it's an area that needs improving, and that's what people have said to us. So as part of the strategy moving forward, it is around getting those messages out to the wider public. Those carers that support people in different communities, hard to reach rural areas are always going to be key for us as well, because they're naturally hard to reach. That does form part of our CQC improvement plan as well. We've got our vassal contracts, the voluntary action contract, which is around providing information support for people. They at any one time support around 7,000 carers. But then you could argue that where's the other 50,000? Kind of where's the access to information, support and advice for them? So there are different routes. And like you said, like those that are kind of more savvy and would know where to access will go on the internet and just know kind of what's going on. I think their access is okay. They know what to do. But it's around the strategy, really targeting those areas to say, okay, where do we need to pinpoint the resource to make it work? So our new, I'm called the vassal contract, but the new support contract, which is going to be tendered as following the strategy, we'll start to pick some of those areas and say, okay, where do we need to focus that resource? Because it's not straightforward for people. You know, so a lot of people don't even see themselves as carers. That's one of the kind of big barriers for that. Because like Mr. Innes was saying, you know, it's mainly family that they care for, and they won't see it. They just won't see it. And some on the flip side, some people do not want to recognise themselves as carers as well. And they just don't. You know, they're doing what they do. They don't want to access support, and that's absolutely their choice. But if we can just make some of those, you know, it might be just some peer support, or just a kind of bounce off support group, or just a bit of information for people. That's the key driver for us.
Yeah, you refer to Vassal, but you see, like in my area from personal experience, they work in Harborough, but they don't actually out in Ullathorpe or wherever. They don't go far enough, you know, they're very parochial in their areas. So a lot depends also on the people who wanted to access to kind of, you know, make that first step. But is there then like a registration service? So for instance, that if I'm going to be a carer for my husband or whatever, that you have me on an email address where you sent me the information or whatever, because the only way I get information now, it is either from my local area coordinator or I get it from our WhatsApp group that comes out, and then I put it out into, you know, my community for somebody who wants to pick it up to pick it up. But is there like a, you know, a registration that, you know, where people can be contacted direct, what there is available, who is, you know, or is it just, you know, hit and miss?
So the council doesn't hold a register of carers. We hold a register of people that we know of who are carers. Those that do Vassal do reach out to, or on Vassal's books, are regularly contacted. So you know, the carer support service is quite key for people receiving information. I appreciate what you're saying around actually what's the reach of that service. And that's something that for the new contracts we'll be looking at, you know, how do you kind of get to those areas, and how do you kind of make sure that people are receiving support where they need it. But it is, you know, it's one of the key areas we'll be looking into 100%. But those that do contact their GP are directed then. So there is, you know, carers, when you have when you recognise as a carer, you then logged on their system as a carer for your GP. So there is a kind of register there. And just to comment back on what Mr. Innes was saying, like, thank you for your comments. I think one bit we talked around kind of what is the funding available for carers and how do people access, etc. I guess part of the council's approach will be around, you know, as part of the strategy, will be around, you know, what is, you know, throughout the action plan and what we're trying to do for people, and recognising that carers are fundamental to the system as such. It is going to be around what is our carers offer kind of moving forward. You know, we've got our current way of doing things, we've got our current services and our current support mechanisms, but we're looking at actually what does that mean in practice, and what's the, you know, what do we need to maybe change moving forward.
Thanks for that. The reason I ask that is that there's a fundamental for me. Carers are trying to give the people that they care quality of life, but the carers are also entitled to a quality of life. And if we don't get that balance right, then the whole thing falls down. And that for me is the fundamental. And actually, if that was part of the policy as well, the strategy to say, look, our aim is to make sure that all people involved in the caring of the vulnerable, our aim is to make sure that they all have a quality of life. I think that would be a great principle.
Yes, thank you for that. And in response to that, and we can make this more explicit in the strategy, but certainly adult carers, and Sharon can speak for young carers and parent carers, but certainly adult carers have the same rights under the Care Act as the people that they care for. So they have a right to an assessment. The eligibility criteria is the same for carers as it is for anybody else. And if they are assessed as requiring support, and if they have unmet needs, we as a local authority have a duty to meet them. And we'll make that explicit within the strategy. And for those people who are not eligible for support through the local authority, for those people who perhaps don't want to contact the local authority, because many people don't actually, that's why we have the contract, the independent sector contract, because that allows us then to reach out to carers who are not eligible for social care services, but still require some support, whether it's peer support, whether it's helplines, whether it's information, advice, guidance. That's why we have those contracts in place, and we'll be looking over the course of the next couple of years to seeing how we can extend that, particularly into rural areas and isolated areas. And we're currently thinking through what that might look like, and whether it might not be sort of a one-size-fits-all, but it might be different kind of funding that's available to different communities.
I have come back very quickly. I forgot to ask something. While you're saying only to adult carers, all of these things are available, and within the report it refers to respite care. So then they, I assume, have a right to respite care as well. But how do they know they have? How can they access it? And who actually provides that respite care? Because I've noticed in the budget, I believe there is only 3.5 million for support. So if you only have 3.5 million, would that cover all of the needs that are provided? Thank you.
Yeah, if I can come back about young carers first, so, and hopefully answer that question. Young carers are perhaps some of our more vulnerable people in society. And it is more important that they are appropriately identified as young carers, apart from a child who would be helping within their family, as every child would help. So if a significant amount of their time is taken up caring for either a parent or another sibling, it's really important that we identify those children. So we work a lot with schools and other agencies in health to make sure that children in those circumstances are identified. They are entitled to an assessment, which we carry out. And we do run support groups for those children and young people. So we do a lot of activities with them that the children themselves report back very positively about. It's some time for them just to be children and just do ordinary childlike things. So as a service, we're really proud of our young carers and proud of the support that we offer. But I think it's important to note that it's really important that we keep them on the agenda to make sure that schools, other people, anybody that has contact with children are identifying those children that may be taking on a larger caring role than any child within a family.
Thank you. I'd just like to welcome Hayley Binley, Head of Services, just joined us online. Mrs. Barber, you've got a question.
Thank you. Fiona Barber, Healthwatch Leicester and Leicestershire. Healthwatch has heard in the last year from a number of people who act as carers for family, friends. And one of the key themes that comes across is not dissimilar to what you have found in the consultation that you've undertaken. So particular challenges are about feeling unheard. And that's not because they're not talking to people within the system. It's because that they feel that the message that they're giving is not being actually understood and acted upon as they would want. There's a little bit of a balance there, obviously, but I think all of us would like to feel if we were contacting the system as a carer, then we would actually feel listened to and appreciated. And I get the valuing carers, but that's slightly different to actually not being heard. The other aspect was we've talked about carers, but the other side of that is the staff that carers interact with, particularly staff that come to a home, for example, domestic home. Inconsistent staff changing on a regular basis, the inability to build a rapport, a relationship and trust with a particular staff member is also featured quite highly in the conversations that carers have had with Healthwatch. And whilst the draft strategy recognises the need for carers to be supported, I think there is also something to be said around the workforce that's interacting with carers. And I think it would be important to recognise that somehow within the strategy, because that would meet a key concern for carers. In the next few days, we're about to publish an insight report that Healthwatch has carried out at the request of the County Council around discharge. And of course, that's a key aspect for carers receiving family members coming out of hospital. And I see it mentioned in the report, but it isn't given a significant chunk of time. And I think there is a conversation to be had that more tailored support around the discharge process could feature in the strategy, because I think that's really important. And what we're after is once people are out of hospital, we really don't want them to go back in. And getting that discharge right would go some way to that. And I know we talk about the figures later on in the meeting, but actually taking time out to make it a specific part of the strategy may be helpful, because of course that will cross over with the work that the ICB and the hospital trusts are doing, and that's always useful. I think Healthwatch would want to touch very briefly, if I may, on young carers, recognising everything that's already been said by people around the table. But I guess in the strategy, apart from what it says around the top of page 17, young carers, so on, talking about young carers in education and supporting them in education is probably quite key to making sure that they don't drop out of the system, that they are able to contribute to the system as they evolve age-wise and experience-wise, at the same time as being carers. So working with people in education sounds lovely, but I think it's certainly worthy of a mention in the strategy document, because we really want young carers when they finish caring, if they do, but to be supported so they can go on, if necessary, to become fully employed members of society and give of their best in whatever direction that they want to go. And the last one you touched on very briefly there was respite. Respite is a real key aspect for carers, even if it's a couple of hours, from a couple of hours for some people to a couple of weeks or a month or two for others. Respite is really expensive. I think we all know that. but trying to feature or factor it into a strategy document in a manner that people know that they're going to get that support might lessen the strains and the stresses that carers experience and allow a person to stay at home for longer, a person that's being cared for. So but I have to say, on the positive side, there are a lot of really good information in here, and the priorities are really good, but they could be expanded a little bit to take on some of the more subtle points that perhaps don't come out immediately. But the consultation, I have to give credit for the consultation, because in 3 months you've managed to contact over 300 people, and you've got a planned engagement later down the line, which is in stark contrast to the ICB, who couldn't manage to consult any members of the public in a 10-week draft of their strategy. So thank you for taking the time to actually engage with people and use them to shape the draft strategy. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Barber, for your knowledgeable input. Mr. King, you waited patiently.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What I wanted to say is a few things. So first of all, welcome this draft strategy, and I have to say I think it's quite ambitious, to be honest. And so then the next point is, where's the money? Is there enough money going to go into this to actually deliver some of the ambition? So example, the page 14, priority 1, we will identify and recognise carers at all points in their caring journey. That's an incredible ambition to have. And I'm just wondering how realistic and practical and how that's actually going to be achieved. That's just the first point of the first priority. So there are some things here which they're very laudable, but I do actually wonder how deliverable some of them are. That's not to say you shouldn't try doing it, but we do need, it all comes down to how much money is going to be put into this. So what I want to say is, I'm a carer. I have been a long time, but I'm I think what's euphemistically called a sandwich carer. So I care for multiple people. I've also done long distance caring for relatives who unfortunately have now passed away. And the point I'm going to get at is that, well, anyone can become a carer at any time, and it can be life changing. And at the same time, there are increasing numbers of working carers, of people of working age who are having to care for either a family, a partner, children who may have issues, older relatives, parents, and they may not just live down the road or next door, unfortunately, but we're all spread out. So I think that, there are some, and one of my experience of this, the biggest concern, the biggest issue that you have if you're working is the financial hit. How are you going to make ends meet? Because although there's lots of benefits for all sorts of things, benefits for when you're a carer is actually quite limited. So straight away, you've got financial, housing, you've got the isolation, and the fact that a lot of people probably, to say you don't actually know anyone of your own age cohort who might be in that role. And I think that to me is, some feedback. And I think that's, if we're going to address some of the barriers to recognising carers, and unfortunately carers don't come along and say, oh, I'm caring. Some do, but the vast majority, as you said earlier, don't necessarily recognise that they're in that caring role. And if they do, they don't necessarily want to tell anyone that they're doing it. They just want to get on and get on with it. So I think it is incredibly difficult. And we're talking about the current support. I'm a registered with Vassal. I've got mixed views about them, to be honest. I don't want to really, some of what they do is okay, but some of it's not relevant. It doesn't rock my boat, and I'm not interested in it. Sadly, I was a trustee of the Carer Centre of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, which closed last March. Not that I was a trustee at that point. After over 30 years of service, it failed because there wasn't enough money in the system to keep support organisations like that afloat, to help them, to basically ensure that they could do the job they're being asked to do. And that, I think, is something that whatever the contract is, whoever is the successful contractor for the support service, if you're offering them a flat fee for 3-5 years, over time that erodes and they just cannot sustain the same level of service. And that's something that's got to be addressed in the contract. Whoever the, and the other thing I wanted to say is that there is a fragmentation, as I'm sure you know, of support services. There's all sorts of, some services are related to condition. So there'll be, for example, Alzheimer's support, and they offer a package of information. And then there's cancer support charities. And obviously the more, there are some conditions that attract more funding and more support and more interest from donors and grant makers, etc., as I'm sure you're aware, and other situations that don't attract that level of interest, and it becomes more reliant on funding from councils, bodies like the council, county council, and others to actually help them deliver those services. So I think, as I said, it all comes back to how much money is going to back this strategy up. And I know what it said, that 3.5 million, but you didn't say what the percentage was of that goes into direct payments to carers, although it does say most of it does, but there wasn't a breakdown. So I wasn't very clear of that 3.5, well, just over nearly 3.6 million, how much actually goes directly to carers, so they can then choose to spend it on what they need to spend it on, rather than actually providing support to, organisations that can do some of what you're saying here. And the last point I wanted to make is GPs, bit of a mixed thing there, because you actually have to register with your GP that you're a carer. So again, it comes back to, and some of them, in my experience, are better at recording carers and then doing that work with carers than others. It is a bit of a mixed bag. And I think that's another area where hopefully this new strategy, if it's developed with the primary care in the right way, then we can get a more positive outcome for people. Yeah, that's what I want to say. Thank you, Chair.
Mrs. Taylor. Oh.
I'll just respond to a couple of those points. That's okay. So a lot of helpful comments, not so many questions, but a lot of helpful comments. Thank you. A couple of questions I think came out. One is, how do we identify people? And clearly that is an ongoing challenge. You only know what you know. And we are reliant on our own services, our own staff, our own colleagues, identifying people through the work that they do. We rely on other health professionals and colleagues in the voluntary sector to tell us and inform us when they come across somebody who they think requires support or is a carer and requires information, advice. Some of that is through GPs, so other health services we've talked about discharge, and obviously it often comes to light when a person is admitted to hospital that there is a carer who's struggling, and so we reach people that way. We will and are improving and increasing the information that is available. So, and we're putting that in different places. So using sort of community venues, libraries, other venues to make sure that information is readily available to people. So if they're going into a library for something else, they might see some information and that might prompt them to make contact with us. Similarly in GPs, I was in a GP surgery recently where, these sort of up banner things that you sort of roll up, and there was a huge up banner which said, "Are you a carer?" And everybody in the waiting room sitting there, like you do in a waiting room, could see that banner. And that's something that's passive, and it doesn't require you to stand up, go to a leaflet, go to a big list of leaflets and pick out the one you want. You can just sit there, and it may. So those sorts of things where I think we could be more proactive in reaching out to people. In terms of money, the 3.5 million that's noted in the strategy and in the papers today is largely the funding for direct payments for carers who are identified as carers and who have an assessment with the local authority. And as a consequence of that assessment, are entitled to a direct payment to help support them in their caring role. There are three major bits of that 3.5 million. One is the money that we use for our external contracts, currently the Vassal contract, that's about £200,000. There's an element which is attached to, we have an internal carer support team, and that's another couple of £100,000. But the rest of that is mainly the direct payment money that goes to carers. In addition to that, there is a much, much bigger sum which goes to support carers through services to the people that they care for. The way that the funding works in through the Care Act is that much of the service delivery that supports carers is given to an individual. So whilst it's supporting carers, and this is where the respite comes in, a number of people have mentioned respite. The respite funding is not part of that 3.5 million. Respite funding is in addition to that, but it's attached to the individual rather than the carer in the vast majority of cases, not in every case, but in the vast majority of cases. So you don't see that in the 3.5 million, and we can't pick that out necessarily very easily in terms of being able to identify exactly how that funding matches to each individual and then collect that up. But it is several millions of pounds, many millions of pounds. So whilst we say that there's sort of 3.5 million directly on carer support, services that we provide to individuals which support carers in their caring role. So if a person comes along and, for example, requires a couple of weeks respite care, the funding for that respite care will go against the individual who is receiving, who it might be, rather than the carer in the vast majority of cases. But it's not easy for us to be able to pick that out in terms of being able to identify exactly how much is being spent in that way. So just a couple of responses.
Thank you, John. Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the invite to come along for this item. Just want to pick up obviously about the young carers. Good to see that you've engaged with them during the period and got their feedback. And I think just echoing other thoughts here, it's the identification of those young carers is the difficulty thing for us. But once they're identified, we do support them really well. I think my question is, and what I'd probably like to see a bit more in the strategy, is how those young carers then become either move on to their adult life without being carer or move into being an adult carer. And I don't see anything here about that transition period, which I think is quite difficult. If young people want to go to college or university, how do they leave the person they're caring for to go off for 3 years and then come back and be their carer? They probably wouldn't do that because they don't feel they're able to. Or they may just go from a young carer into an adult carer and carry on working and bring up their own family. So I suppose what support is there for that transition period, I think would be a little bit more. I don't read any of that within the strategy.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Councillor Taylor. We can make sure that's drawn out and added to the strategy.
Any more questions from anybody? Right, this report is an update for us to note. Members' comments will be recorded in the minutes prior to the report going to the Cabinet. Is that agreed? Thank you, Mr. Balls, Mrs. Taylor and Mrs. Danks for attending the meeting. You're welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting if you wish. Item 9 is the National Performance Benchmarking 2024-25 and Performance Report 2025 26 position at Q3 at pages 43 to 58 on the agenda pack. John Wilson will introduce the report and hand over to Matt Williams, Service Development Business Partner. John, Matt, can you please go ahead?
Yeah, I can jump straight in there. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So this is the kind of the regular performance report we bring to this committee. The difference with the version we got today is that it picks up a lot of the benchmarking information that the Department of Health released in December for adult social care. So you'll see that throughout the report, and it's that bit that I'll kind of focus on in my comments this afternoon, if that's okay. But following that, happy to take questions and comments across the whole report. I think before we get into the detail, it's probably just worth reflecting on paragraph 5 in the background, which just notes that, and I think I've spoken about this on a few other occasions in the committee, the change that we're going through at the moment with adult social care and the collection of data nationally, a big change in the 24-25 data that we're looking at today was the first time that this was released by DHSC. So comparisons with previous years aren't really possible for a number of indicators, and that's just been flagged out on paragraph 5. So get into the detail with adult social care. We'll start with paragraphs 9 and 10, which look at contacts to the authority. And this is shown as a rate per 100,000 to make the data comparable across different local authorities. For the 18 to 64 age group, Leicestershire was slightly lower than our peer group average, and that peer group being 16 councils that have similar kind of social, economic and demographic setup as ourselves. But for the over 65s, we were slightly higher. This may be influenced slightly by the way we capture data regarding commissions on behalf of health, and that might have had some impact on that higher position. Paragraph 11 touches on people with learning disabilities living at home. This has been a strong area for Leicestershire for a number of years, and 24-25 was no different. 87% was our proportion compared to the national figure of 81%. I won't go through every paragraph, but I'll dip into paragraphs 13 and 14, which look at reablement. And these are probably two metrics that have seen a notable change with the way the data has been collected over the last few years. So there's two metrics in the National Adult Social Care Outcomes Framework regarding reablement. The first of those looks at the immediate situation post that reablement service, and do people need to go on to long-term services or not? In the Leicestershire position is just slightly lower than the national position. In Leicestershire, 74% of people coming through reablement didn't need ongoing long-term services. And that compares to a national average of 77%. The second metric within that national framework moves on 12 weeks really, and looks to see if people are remaining in the community 12 weeks post a discharge and a reablement service. And again, Leicestershire find ourselves just slightly short of that national average. So in Leicestershire, 59% of people remained in the community after 12 weeks, and that 59% compares to 61% nationally. Paragraph 15 then starts to look at the overall number of people we support, and so do other authorities. And again, we use a rate per 100,000 to kind of make that a comparable position. For our working age adults, those aged 18 to 64, the figure was lower than the national position and also that of our peer group. For those aged 65 or over, the rate in Leicestershire was again lower than the national rate, but we were a bit higher than our peer group of other authorities. Paragraph 16 and 17 start to lean into kind of residential care, and paragraph 16 looks at the proportion of people that we do support that are in residential or nursing care permanently. Now, clearly, to support people's independency, to be living at home or in the community, it is more preferable. At a national level, for those aged 18 to 64, the figure was 14.5% supported in residential and nursing care. In Leicestershire, that figure was much lower at 10%. And it's a similar position for the way we support our over 65s. So in the national position, that was 42%, and that compares to 34% locally. So again, notably lower. Paragraph 17 looks at the number of admissions into permanent residential care through 24-25, and you'll find there that Leicestershire again are lower than the national position. I'll probably skip to paragraph 22 just to highlight the survey. So we do an annual survey of people who use our services. There's 4 metrics there listed in paragraph 20. We've got finding information, the ability to have social contact, overall general satisfaction, and those people who say they feel safe. You'll probably see reading through that paragraph that Leicestershire do fall just slightly below the national average on most of those metrics in that survey. Paragraphs 21 through to 23 relate to safeguarding, and it's probably paragraph 23 I just highlight for you. This again is a new metric within the National Outcomes Framework, and this is looking at the proportion of inquiries where the risk has been reduced or removed. And in Leicestershire, that figure, clearly we need that to be as high as possible. And in Leicestershire, that figure was 95%, and that was 4 percentage points higher than the national position at 91%. And finally, for adult social care, paragraph 24 picks up on the annual review. So these are people last March who were receiving a service and had been for at least 12 months and therefore appropriate for having an annual review. In Leicestershire, the figure for that period was 77.3%, and that's somewhat higher than the national position of 59%. And again, we can see there actually by the end of the third quarter of the current year, that 77.3% had actually improved locally to 78.3%. So that is the position with regards to the adult social care side of the department. To pick up on communities and wellbeing, we don't actually have a national framework like the outcomes framework for adult social care. So what we do is we work with the department to set robust kind of annual targets, and then we divvy them up on a monthly basis to get a milestone to work out if we're on track to meet that annual target. So starting on paragraph 26, we look at visits to heritage sites. Between April and December 2025, those visits were 3% higher than the same period of the previous year. However, that is just falling slightly short of one of these milestones, the kind of 9-month milestones we would say, and it's just short by 1.9%. Paragraph 27 looks into our libraries, and we've got a good number of physical visits into libraries at the moment, an increase of 3.7% on the same period of the previous year, and that is just slightly above where we'd want it to be at the December milestone. This increase in visits has certainly improved total loans. There's been a 1% increase overall. That has obviously been influenced by more than 1 million e-loans as noted in the paragraph. Junior loans, however, are slightly down on this time last year, 3.4% below the milestone as well. And we believe that is possibly to do with the recording system. There's been a new library management system last year, and there are fixes now in to kind of resolve a situation where we believe we're probably recording junior loans. Just to finish off then, we've got volunteer hours, and they're much higher than they were the previous year, 22% up when we compare April to December of 25 to the previous year. Then finally, paragraph 29 and 30, these two metrics actually work on an academic year. So far we've been looking at a more standard reporting year of April to March. For the creative learning service and attendances at their workshops, that is an academic year, so going from August through to December, that was the first term. 124 more attendances than the previous year and above the December milestone, so that's a good position there for the creative learning service. And finally, adult learning service. In the first term, the kind of the learning aims that have been completed successfully was running at 88.4%. That compares to an 84% target. And that is the key points I'm happy to outline in the report, and we're happy to take questions and comments and thoughts. Thank you.
So do we have any questions from members? Mr. Innes, we'll start with you.
Thanks for the report. Thanks, Chair. Is the aim is to have people resident at home or their permanent placement. Do you classify things like supported living as being in their permanent? Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. And the annual review, again, in my experience, it is so important that an annual review takes place because circumstances, well, month to month can change, but certainly within a year, the circumstances can change quite dramatically. So I know we've got a good level, but I would even like to see that even higher. I think it would mean that we could use resources better if we fully understand what's happening in the community and with the people that we support.
There's no other questions and comments. Oh, sorry. Sidelines. Mr. King.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I was out, yeah, line of sight there. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's quite a lot in this, really, isn't there? But just to pick up Mr. in his point, I think he has a point. So if you look at something like reablement, which I know is the Heart team, and it says that between April and December 25, 3,100 people benefit from the reablement service for the first time. What I'm not clear from that is what the outcomes of that reablement was. Was the reablement that the outcome that those people were able to stay in their own home? Was the reablement not as successful, so it was like a partial success? So the people then had to move from their own home into, for example, supported living, or they might have needed to go into residential care or a care setting. So I'm not terribly clear from that what the outcome was, unless it's somewhere else and I have missed it. But the other thing I'd like to say, there is a lot of text. And so we're talking about, and I just wonder, I know there are sort of indicators later on, but I'm not sure if this couldn't have been presented presentationally, whether there isn't more that could be shown graphically or using tables rather than buried in lots of text. It's just a personal preference, but I mean, but anyway, just if that's possible, or anyway, that was just the one thing I had picked up, but also, yeah, that was what I wanted to mention. There are probably other things, but that's the only one I want to go on at the moment. Thank you.
So just in respect of the reablement figures, there are additional reporting mechanisms related to the department's operating model. So we will look at the number of new people coming into the service and the outcomes that we're able to achieve. So that would be people leaving the service with some level of support, but potentially a lesser level of support, but also those people that have been fully reabled. It would be fair to say that there are some people whose needs deteriorate during that period of reablement and may require a readmission to hospital or a move to residential care, but that's based on individual and personal circumstances. So we know that the service achieves good outcomes, and what we're aiming to do is increase the number of people that have access to that reablement service so that we can support more people to remain independent and live in their own properties for as long as possible.
So just to add to that then, the report obviously focuses a lot on our national framework in adult social care, and that enables us to kind of have a robust set of metrics that we know how to calculate and know how to report, and we can compare ourselves like we are today. The first, though, is on paragraph 14, was that bit about people not needing ongoing long-term services. So that would be the idea of, say, supported living or other forms of services. That's 77, or unless it's just 74% of people didn't need any form of services post-reablement. That's a really good outcome for those people. And then just to pick up on your second point, if I may, the kind of the presentation of the data, I think it's useful. We obviously made some changes to the appendix this time. Unfortunately, the timing wasn't great, was it? Because you'll find in the appendix on the kind of the more graphical side of it, I've put a lot of times this isn't comparable to previous years, unfortunately. And these two indicators around reablement are probably the two that, as I mentioned, have been hit the most with the changes to our data capture and reporting. Previously, we were more mid 80% and possibly a few percentage points higher than the national position. So that's just changed a bit recently. So clearly something we're going to be monitoring more regularly and keeping our eye on. But I'll take your point about the graphic side of it, and we'll bear that in mind for sure. And if I may just Chair, on the reporting side, the annual reviews mentioned a moment ago, certainly a key point, and we do want to improve on that. That's very much the case, and we do monitor that on a monthly basis. Well, it's a daily basis, in fact, but I speak with John and colleagues on a monthly basis. Thank you.
There's no more questions. The committee is asked to note the national performance benchmarking of 2024-2025 and performance report, which we have done, and our comments will be recorded in the minutes and passed on to Cabinet for consideration. Is that agreed? Right. Yeah, that's fine. Item 10, we have the Care Quality Commission Assessment 2025 Improvement Plan Delivery Update at pages 59 to 70 of the agenda. Tracy Ward, Deputy Director of Adults and Communities and Assistant Director, will introduce this item, and she is supported by Debbie Moore, Improvement Manager. Tracy, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the purpose of the report is to provide the committee with an update on the progress made in respect to the delivery of the CQC improvement plan prior to submission of the progress update to the Department of Health and Social Care, which is due on 17th of March 2026. In respect of policy framework and previous decisions, in January of this year, the committee received a report regarding the update on progress made with delivering the improvement plan, and that was for information. So this report provides more information related to that. In November 2025, the committee received a report summarising the CQC assessment findings, highlighting key strengths and areas for development. A summary improvement plan was presented, which outlined the actions that will deliver improvements identified by the CQC assessment report. And the committee requested quarterly report updates to align with the Department of Health and Social Care reporting cycle. So just to give some context in respect of background, CQC published the assessment report for Leicestershire in September 2025, giving an overall rating of requires improvement. Authorities achieving requires improvement rating are required to develop an improvement plan and provide quarterly reports to the Department of Health and Social Care demonstrating progress against those actions. The Department of Health and Social Care contract with Partners for Care and Health to work with councils assessed as requiring improvement, and an improvement advisor has been appointed to the local authority. There are 3 stages in respect of that improvement plan, and at stage 3, paragraph C, we've got that stage 3 quarterly updates to the Department of Health and Social Care and ongoing support arrangements will commence on the 17th of March 26, as I've alluded to, and the CQC improvement plan will be submitted along with the Department of Health summary reported by partners in health and care. Some of the improvement plan is attached as an appendices. Just in respect of the County Council's improvement plan, there are 10 key improvement areas identified with an overarching element regarding underpinning elements related to performance and oversight. And what I will ask is that Debbie takes us through those 10 components and identifies the actions to date.
Thanks, Tracy. So the first area that we're looking at, and probably the most significant area of improvement, is around the timeliness of our assessments and reviews. We have temporary agency resource who are supporting us to address those current waiting lists for assessments. And we are seeing progress now with the reported waits steadily reducing. We're also undertaking some engagement with staff, which will help us develop tools that will help better manage and prioritise incoming referrals to the department, and also support our managers to allocate those tasks to their teams. We've got some further engagement schedules for this month, which will help us identify opportunities to streamline the duty process and other processes sitting around that, which will help us to respond more timely and effectively to those incoming referrals. One of the also significant pieces of work we're doing is looking at changes to reporting our weights, which are in development. There's a lot of conversation going on around those to really get the detail that sits underneath that reporting correct. So we're reporting a complete and accurate picture of our weights for assessments. Moving on to our occupational therapy service, procurement of an external service to complete a number of occupational therapy assessments is now underway. It's moved on slightly since the report was written, in that the information governance agreements are now in place and the contract is currently with legal for finalisation. That provider will focus on completing the most overdue occupational therapy assessments. And once they're in place, we expect those to really see a significant improvement in that position. Occupational therapy service staff have also actively engaged in designing a new front door service for their team that will provide efficient and effective response at that first point of referral, which will hopefully put us in good stead for the future and maintaining those lower waiting lists for OT assessment. Our carers assessment team is currently undergoing some changes. So the change to the team has now been agreed, and there'll be a transfer of that team from its current situation in our customer service centre. It'll move into an operational commissioning team, sorry. And that team will also be expanded a little so that it can also complete reviews of carers' needs and support in addition to assessments. We're expecting that team to transfer over on the 1st of April with the recruitment being completed after that date. Adult social care finance assessments, we have some recruitment of temporary posts is underway. We're expecting those roles to be filled in April. This additional capacity will maintain our improvement in the timeliness of those financial assessments. Our review teams are focused on completing their most overdue assessments within their team allocations. We've also identified a number of improvements to recording of reviews which are being implemented. Further workarounds that improve recording within our locality teams is commencing as well. Moving on to access to information, advice and guidance. We have completed an information maturity self-assessment, which was then followed up by a workshop which was facilitated by our Partners in Care and Health advisor. There were a number of recommendations that have come out of that, which are informing our development of our information offer. We're also collaborating with some students from Loughborough University School of Design to explore other options about how we can improve our information offer across our website and also other channels. There are a number of pieces of work that are already underway with our IT colleagues in using artificial intelligence to help improve the search function on our website. The pilot of that is still underway, but we're hoping that that will be successful and we'll be able to implement that across adult social care web pages as well. We've also been looking at developing some leaflets to introduce adult social care, which have been considered by our members of our engagement panel recently. And we would hope that those will be agreed and finalised relatively soon so we can start distributing those through a variety of different community outlets to promote the service and enable people to access it a little bit more easily than they can currently. So we've already touched on reablement and hospital discharge. There's been a detailed analysis of reablement capacity, which is now complete. And we've profiled the capacity increases required in the reablement team, which will enable them to increase their capacity and ensure that more people are able to benefit from reablement in the community. Hospital discharge cases have been reviewed. We hadn't identified any inconsistencies which would lead to unsafe discharge through that review. And we will also be taking forward promotion of the escalation routes to ensure that our colleagues, both within the hospital discharge team and elsewhere, are fully aware of those escalation routes if they are concerned about the safety of a discharge from hospital. The next item, the carer strategy, has been covered already, so I will skip over that one if that's okay. Moving on to sufficiency of provider services. It's a supported accommodation market statement uploaded to the County Council's website in January, and that was also disseminated to developers and service providers. A business case finalised for the development of extra care facilities in Hinckley and Colville, and discussions continue with developers about adding to the capacity within extra care accommodation across the county. We're also due to start commissioning of Community Life Choices Day services early this year, both of which will help to ensure that we've got capacity within those areas across the entire county. The other piece of work that we're looking at within commissioning is around a dashboard which will help support easier identification of any gaps in commission services, whether that is in particular areas of the county or whether that's in particular types of services. But we're in early stages of deciding which particular metrics we want to be included in that dashboard. In relation to our equity of access and experience, we're still in fairly early stages around sort of shaping what that is going to look like. But our initial focus is trying to work with our partners in our communities to understand the barriers that people face, particularly in rural communities, and those people who are experiencing homelessness when they're accessing adult social care services. In relation to safeguarding, we've completed a survey around the use of the professional safeguarding referral portal. That work has highlighted a couple of areas that need a little development, and we'll be continuing to engage with our providers and other professionals to design that new form, what that's going to look like, and ensure that it works for all the professionals that will need to complete it. We're also reviewing the reporting of our safeguarding referral pathway, considering improvements that will really strengthen the monitoring of the pathway around our agreed timescales. There are some detailed discussions being undertaken about precisely what we're measuring, how it's measured, just to really make sure that as a department we have a high level of assurance that the pathway is flowing as it should, and that our targets are being met along the way. The preparation for adulthood work, which is being led as part of the corporate review, that has now moved to its next stage, and governance arrangements are being agreed. Our workforce, so this is Adult Social Care's workforce. The workforce plan is in draft, and there will be some consultation with staff before that is finalised, along with the delivery plan that will underpin that. Our analysis of demands and caseloads has been undertaken. Those findings have all been presented now. We've provided it's given us some assurance that once the backlogs are in our assessments, etc., are cleared, we will have the right capacity to maintain those levels of weights and keep on top of demand, but there is a little bit of additional work needed to ensure that the right resources are within the right teams. I've also got a new assurance group in place that will provide assurance that the current practice audits that are undertaken on a regular basis are actually effective in driving improvements in practice across our care pathway teams. Partnerships in joint funding is really focused on our funded nursing agreements. This area of work is being delivered in collaboration with the Integrated Care Board. There are a number of initiatives that were completed by the ICB and accommodation review teams some time ago, which led to improvements in those funded nursing placements. And we're really reliant on the ICB to really pick up that work around revising their policy and Green and Action Plan with us to continue progressing that work. And then sitting across top of these work streams is our performance and oversight group, which is really providing the assurance across all the work streams where reporting is a key element, that reporting developments both meets the needs of the department and also the CQC going forward. That's all from me. Thank you.
So I'm just going to wrap things up if that's okay. Just to make the committee aware, there are interdependencies that are mapped in respect of the CQC improvement plan, whether that relate to work that's underway related to Newton Europe, the work that we've undertaken in respect of the medium-term financial strategy. One of the things that Debbie talked about is that we have got additional resources in place, and those additional resources were approved by full council on the 18th of February this year. Just to identify some of the key risks, failure to make adequate progress with the improvement actions identified will result in further intervention from the Department of Health and Social Care. And the second, consecutive requires improvement rating will lead to an enhanced support and monitoring, including direct engagement from the Department of Health and Social Care. As Debbie alluded to, what we're trying to do is to look at how we maximise the use of technology in respect of work that we're undertaking. And I just wanted to pick up something, Fiona, that you said about the Health Watch report in respect of people's feedback about their hospital discharges. So again, that's one of the kind of interdependencies or codependencies. Having read that report, we know that some people fed back that they received good quality information, but also relate to the carer strategy, that carers were not always involved in that consultation about hospital discharge processes. So there's some of the things that we're kind of knitting together, if that makes sense, in respect of findings from other surveys and feedback from other organisations. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tracy and Debbie. Do we have any questions or comments from members? Mrs. Page, we'll start with you.
I'm quite exhausted from listening to all of the work you have done and put into this. Thanks for that. And my question is really quite simple, because I have listening and I've noted to it. And I made a little note because as I was looking at the outcomes and the process and, you know, the reductions of waiting times and whatever, I thought that was really, really commendable. And I made a little note to myself, and I hear what you're saying, but you're putting all of these measures in place. And I was wondering, and I'm sure the answer is yes, but, you know, just to get it clear in my mind, how are you looking at the future risks and sustainability of all of your actions in order to make sure that, you know, you've had that learning curve so it doesn't happen again? Because as the increase of demand keeps constantly rising, you could have all of your figures going up again. So, you know, so how do you cover that one up? Thank you. And thanks for the good work.
So just in respect of continuous reporting and improvement, it's not a static component. So we would continue to monitor the progress in respect of, for example, the changes in volumes of wait and how long people are waiting and maximum durations. So that's something that, as Debbie alluded to, we have to look at a change in respect of culture and practice and process. But we have to ensure that working with Matt Williams and the Data and BI team, that we've got correct recording of information that is inputted into the system that we can get out effectively to monitor that progress in respect of those weights. So there's work underway in relation to how we record and how we measure that success in respect of that recording.
Can I just add into that? I think the other important factor is the one that Debbie mentioned around undertaking regular workforce audits, so that we understand caseloads, we understand throughput, we understand where there may be bottlenecks building. And one of the learning points, I think, as we came out of the pandemic, particularly for us, was that, well, actually, we went through the pandemic process having just made some significant structural changes in the department, which included an MTFS saving of about 1.7 million on staffing and resources. And then we hit a period where demand doubled. I think the resource that we are now putting back in is probably partly the resource we took out, with some addition, actually. But I think we just need to make sure that as we move forward, we are matching the resource to the demand, so that if it, when we look at our MTFS projections each year, we're building in whether there is additional demand, and if there is additional demand, do we need additional capacity to meet that demand?
May I? So it's a dovetailing process of evaluating performance and then meeting the staffing to the demand. But it's surely that sometimes the demand outstrips before you can get the staff. So then what?
Well, as I say, we need to be a bit agile, don't we? What generally happens is that we usually have an underspend on staffing, and that's simply because where vacancies arise, it takes 3 to 6 months to fill them on a permanent basis. You have to get the advert out, go to advert, do the interviews, get the person onboarded into the organisation, particularly if it's social workers or occupational therapists. But we can be agile with that underspend. So we can use that for temporary staffing where we need to. So we can bring temporary staffing in ahead of any planned staffing recruitment that we need to do.
Debbie, can you turn your mic off, please? And we've got a question from Mr. King.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report. I mean, it's quite helpful. However, what it doesn't tell me is the timelines of when some of these actions are going to be completed by. I think that's quite important. And just picking up what Mrs. Page said, I think sustainability, and again, it talks about short-term resources, but long-term. I've just listened very carefully to what was said, but in a few areas it talks about recruitment of additional resources. Now, what I'm not clear about and don't understand is how long it takes from day one of deciding we need some additional resource to that person actually being on board, actually starting work. How long does that actually take? And is there any way that we can actually, because to me that's a lot of it is relying on people being on board. And if it's taking, I don't know, let's just pick a figure out the air, 3-4 months, perhaps longer than that, to get someone on board, is there any way of shortening those recruitment times? Again, I haven't got the information here, but I think that'd be quite useful to understand. Is it, and where we stand in terms of other, because let's be clear, if someone's thinking, I know I'll apply for a job at Leicestershire County Council, and they may also be applying for jobs elsewhere. And if we're, shall we say, a bit slow off the mark, or our processes are a bit more long-winded than others, people generally go for the, if they get offered a job somewhere else, they go and take that job somewhere else. So I'm just wondering how quicker feet are we in actually being able to recruit people? I understand we can go through agencies and we get people very quickly, but that's also very expensive, much more expensive than hiring people ourselves. So I'm just trying to understand, are there some bottlenecks here that we haven't fully explored, or as members we don't understand, but is it a wider issue that the County Council needs to address? Thank you.
So I'll take home care assessment re-employment teams. We've talked about that service as part of one of the things. One of the elements that we've looked at is from the process of inviting people to interview to them actually commencing the role, and whether there are processes and steps within that time frame that we can lessen. But we've also introduced a process by which we keep people informed of the process. So interview date is today. You will hear about whether you're successful by Thursday. We will start to undertake the relevant checks and balances with you at this stage. So we're trying to squash that process. In respect of the wider resources that relate to the care pathway, one of the conversations that we've had with the managers that will actually manage those people coming into the service is that we have a blanket advert that goes out advertising the numbers of roles and posts and we invite people to interview rather than en masse rather than at different stages. So if Debbie manages a team and I manage a team, we have that advert go out at the same time, so we're not staggering it. So hopefully that should improve things. But I think one of the things is about selling the benefits of working for Leicestershire County Council and keeping people informed of those processes in respect of the recruitment process. So we are trying to address the kind of timeframes for that. But if you have got people that are moving, say, from another local authority, we're bound by their kind of notice period. So we have to be mindful of those types of things. So you're right, it is easier to get agency on board, but they're not a permanent workforce, which is what we need to have going forward. Any more questions?
No, I think that answers the point. Thank you.
Lovely. Right. The committee is asked to note the update report on progress made to deliver the Care Quality Commission Improvement Plan. Prior to submission of the progress update to the Department of Health and Social Care due the 17th of March 2026. The committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes. Is everybody agreed? Lovely. Item 11. So the final substantive item at agenda item 11 is the use of resources in adult social care. The report is at pages 71 to 168 of the agenda. John Wilson, Director of Adults and Communities, will introduce this item, and he's joined again by Tracy Ward. John, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report on the Local Government Association's use of resources adult social care reports, which was published toward the end of 2025, and it covers the reporting period 24-25. The LGA have been publishing these reports now for since about 2018. And essentially what it does is it brings together all the sort of performance information and finance information that authorities submit for a reporting period, and it tries to then bring that together, collate it, and produce a report which provides comparable information across different authorities. That said, as it says in paragraph 6 and 7, it is worth noting that national data collections do always contain some level of inaccuracy, and different authorities do report things slightly differently. Even if we've got national frameworks, it's just inevitable that that happens. It's worth saying that the information that's contained in the report is probably made better use of in terms of asking questions about individual authorities than it is just trying to compare wholesale from one authority to another. So with those caveats in mind, what we've done is we have tried to include the main points that come out of the report. So starting off with expenditure, you'll see that at paragraph 8, total spend on adult social care expressed as a spend per adult. So this is if you take the total amount of money that we spend on adult social care and you divide it by the total number of adults in Leicestershire. It comes out at £500 per adult, which is about 21% lower than the overall spend for England, for all authorities across England. There are a number of reasons why that might be the case. So, for example, you might have a higher number of older adults in a population, and clearly older adults tend to be the biggest single spending area. We do have a higher number of older adults in Leicestershire, so you might therefore say, well, why wouldn't spend be higher? Well, alongside of that, you have to take into account deprivation. Science particularly impacts spend on older adults as opposed to working age adults, where it has less of an effect. And the reason for that is that deprivation affects the number of people who fund their own care, and it affects the number of people who can contribute to the care that they receive. So in Leicestershire, we have quite a low level of deprivation compared to other authorities, and therefore more people are funding their own care and more people are contributing higher amounts to the care that they receive, which brings down the cost to the local authority. In terms of overall spend per adult in Leicestershire, it increased during 24-25 by 1.7%, whereas in England overall it increased by 7.3%. So you can see that actually the cost of care and cost of delivering care went up at a lower rate in Leicestershire than it did elsewhere. That's probably to do with the way that we undertake our fee uplifts and in the way that we commission care and the services that we commission compared to the services that others commission. We've included the table that was included in the MTFS report, but it just provided some additional information alongside of that. So paragraph 14 talks about the overall spend in Leicestershire compared to others. And you can see that we are the second lowest spending authority in the country on adult social care. And if you just look at adult social care for people aged 65 plus, we are the lowest spending authority in the country. In terms of the people served and the numbers of people served for people who are of working age, 18 to 64, we support 0.7% of the working age population, which is slightly lower than the average across England, which is just under 0.9%. And on that particular client group, we spent £35,000 on long and short-term support per younger adult supported. So two different calculations here. One is the overall number of people in the population the overall cost spent by the authority divided by the number of people in the population. That's the spend per adult. And then there's a second calculation, which is the overall cost of support to the people that we actually support, which is the second one, the £35,000. And again, you can see how that compares to the England average. In terms of older adults, we supported 5% of the older adult population. That's people over 65 with long-term care and support, which was not very dissimilar to the England average of 5.25%. And it says there Leicestershire is ranked 97th, so this is out of 153. So about average. In terms of demand, again, spending increased in terms of older adults by a lesser amount than the England average. So 1.9% compared to 6.9%. And you can see that we spend £752 per person for people over the age of 65 compared to just over £1,000 across England. The report then goes on to look at different settings of care. And how many people are supported at home compared, for example, to people who are supported in 24-hour care. How many people are supported overall in terms of long-term support. And again, you'll see, as Matt's has already indicated, lower numbers of people being supported in long-term care than in other similar authorities. In terms of cost of care, going on to paragraph 30, you can see that we care home costs for residential and nursing care slightly above the average, so ranked 44 out of 153 particularly for working age, and care home costs for older adults similar to neighbouring councils but higher than the regional average. And then the final area that the report looks at is income. And what the report shows is that we have a higher than average level of income, both from people who are supported from client contributions and from the NHS, which includes the Better Care Fund and comparable councils. But happy to take any comments that members may have.
Thank you, John. Do we have any questions from the members? Lovely. The committee are asked to note the Local Government Association's report on the use of resources in adult social care, and the committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes. Is that agreed by all? Right, the next thing is item 12 is the date of the next meeting. Members are asked to note the date of the next meeting is on the 1st of June 2026. Item 13, any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent. As stated at the beginning of the meeting, I have no urgent items. Lovely. That now concludes today's meeting, and thank you all for attending.